Alright gang, this is Mr. Barrowline again to come with your next installment of video lessons for World War II. Just a quick heads up on this one, we're going to skip a section. The Holocaust, I believe is section 2 in your book, and the Homefront is section 4. So we're going to be skipping over section 3 because I thought that the Pacific War went a little bit better with the end of the war section. So we're gonna group them together a little bit differently. So today we're going to be talking about the Holocaust, something that a lot of you guys have probably heard of and studied a little bit before. You've probably seen movies about it and things of that nature. But we're going to go in a little more detail about the Holocaust. So during the Holocaust, Germany's government basically has had executed a systematic plan to try to wipe the Jews off the face of Europe altogether. And they wound up killing over 6 million Jews and 5 million other people designated as undesirable. So we're going to talk about the history of Nazi anti-Semitism, the Nazi government's final solution, and how the U.S. Responded to the Holocaust. All right, so anti-Semitism had a long history throughout Europe in general, not just Germany. Europe and even in the United States, anti-Semitism was not an unheard of idea. It was pretty widely accepted. This hostility and prejudice against Jews. So it existed for a long time. Hitler used that existing anti-Semitism and basically bounced that off with the nationalism, telling Germans that they came from a superior race of people called the Aryans. And he also, in Mein Kampf, made Jews the scapegoat for all the problems that had happened after World War I and for the decline of German power. So Jews had lived in Germany for quite some time, for centuries really, and hostility, like I said, it existed towards Jews in Europe in general and in the United States and other places throughout the world since the Middle Ages. A lot of it was an outgrowth of the medieval church really went out of its way to humiliate and force Jews to convert to Catholicism. But what happens is the Germans take it from a prejudice based on religion to a hatred based on ancestry. They create this distinction of Jews as a race, which isn't really accurate. So once Hitler came to power, he begins a campaign against Jews after he becomes Chancellor of Germany. And they establish a series of laws. First, and these are known as the Nuremberg Laws. And they strip Jews of their citizenship, and they take away most of their civil and economic rights. They can only do certain jobs. They can only live in certain places. They are not full citizens. They can't vote, things of that nature. So basically you have this increasing anti-Jewish sentiment, not just among supporters, but in the government itself now. You have the law basically saying it's okay to discriminate against Jews. And this kind of comes to a head in Kristallnacht when anti-Jewish riots break out and hundreds are killed and even more are forced out of their homes and businesses. Eventually they're going to be sent to concentration camps. Now 100,000 Jews do manage to leave Germany immediately after Kristallnacht, but some find it difficult to leave as they don't have money. These policies have basically trapped them in a country that wants them gone. Also, other countries, including the United States, are very reluctant to take in Jewish immigrants. For instance, the U.S. limits the number of Jews that they'll take. All right, so anyway, as the Nazis expand their power throughout Europe through the war, many of the Jews in Europe come under German control. So they start by building concentration camps to put Jews in. And in most cases, they're sent to these concentration camps in other countries and in Germany where Jews will be sent to and made to work. Conditions in the camp are terrible. They're not fed enough. They're barely given medical treatment. In many cases, There's terrible experiments performed on them. It's just terrible conditions all around. In addition, they also restrict where Jews can live. Those Jews that aren't sent to the camps immediately are basically forced to live in ghettos or neighborhoods of cities that are basically walled off, more or less, or blocked off. And basically, life in the ghettos really isn't much better than the concentration camps. You have mass starvations, and in Warsaw, Poland, it becomes so bad that there's a massive uprising, and it results in the death of thousands of Jews. In 1941, Hitler goes from simply discriminating against Jews to basically talking about getting rid of them, and this is called the final solution. And at first, they send out these mobile killing units called Einsatzgruppen, which go out, they track down Jews, and they just kill them by the dozens. But that's not efficient enough for Hitler and the Nazis. And so they develop a plan known as the final solution. All right, so in the final solution, you have three major aspects of it, or you have two steps before the final solution. One is you have the camps, the concentration camps, and these are prisoners for Jews, POWs in some cases, and other people labeled as undesirable or enemies of the Nazis. They receive little food, they're forced to work very difficult labor, and this combination of overwork and malnutrition basically is designed to kill the Jews working in the camps. Minor offenses are punished by death almost always. There's not a court system or anything like that. The ghettos, again, are just as bad. Food is scarce, starvation's rampant. You have horrible disease, epidemics going through, and again, in Warsaw, the worst of them, you have the Jewish Fighting Organization, which actually does fight back. So finally, Hitler decides this isn't happening quickly enough. We need a final solution. And the final solution is, for all intents and purposes, genocide. The attempt to kill all the Jews in Europe. And basically, instead of work camps or concentration camps, there's a building of new death camps. Auschwitz, for instance, Dachau, those types of places. And they're killed by all sorts of methods. By weapons, guns, incinerators, they're burned alive, gas chambers are often used, and 3 million Jews are killed in an extermination camp alone. So, half of the Jews are killed in the death camps, while the other half die in ghettos and concentration camps before that. So 5 million other types of people. You have gypsies, the handicapped, the homosexuals, people with mental disabilities. All of them are targeted for concentration and death as well. Now, Americans knew that Hitler was harsh on Jews, and they even knew about the Kristallnacht, but still limited the number of Jews who could move to the United States. And this is because there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the U.S. at the time as well. But about 1942, American officials began to hear the first whispers about the final solution, about these death camps and these concentration camps. Most were doubtful at first and thought that they were just war rumors, but by 1944, it becomes obvious that this is true, and Roosevelt does create the War Refugee Board. And this allows the United States to help 200,000 Jews to escape, but by then it's really too late for most. So as Soviet and American forces begin to squeeze Germany from the east and the west, forces begin to uncover these camps. The first are the Soviets, who uncover Auschwitz, which is probably the most famous death camp. Then American soldiers in 45 start to run into them as well. So this gives proof of the rumors. And many inmates, even after they're rescued, are going to die because they're just so sick and so malnourished. After the war, the Allies are going to put many Nazis on trial for what's called the Nuremberg trials. And this is the International Military Tribunal. 22 Nazis are actually convicted, including kind of the architect Hermann Goering. And he was kind of the guy who planned it all. And since Nuremberg, there's still groups that hunt Nazis down. Several have been captured, some in South America. That was a popular place for them to go. Several have been captured and tried in different courts, including in Israel. All right, so now quickly we're going to shift gears and talk about what was going on in the war in the United States, how U.S. society was affected. Millions of military men and women were serving, but there were Americans on the home front that were doing things as well. So we're going to talk about the sacrifices and struggles that Americans experienced, how the U.S. sought to win American support. We'll talk about propaganda, what Japanese internment, what happened there, and how World War II expanded the role of the government in people's lives. All right, so one way that people help the war effort is by conserving their own food. And some of this is government mandated. For instance, you have rationing on items like butter, sugar, and meat, things that soldiers are going to need to eat. Metal and glass and rubber are tough to find. There's scrap drives. People will turn in their scrap metal and it'll be melted back down to make war materials. So this is a popular thing for people to do, like planting victory gardens. So instead of buying food at the grocery or buying vegetables at the grocery, they'll grow their own. Also, Americans by the millions bought war bonds. They invested in the war effort. So the government borrowed most of its money for the war from the American people. And finally, of course, people sacrifice their loved ones, whether just from being absent or, in fact, losing. You had blue stars when you had a soldier in your family that was gone. You'd put a blue star on your front window or front door. But sometimes when they didn't come back, it was a gold star. So it was a very real depiction of the sacrifice people were making. And of course, everybody read about the war all the time in the newspapers. And one of the most popular journalists was Ernie Powell, who wrote who represented the soldier's view really well. All right, so Americans supported the war in many ways, and Roosevelt called on the nation to protect the four freedoms: freedom from speech, or freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. He couched the war as a war against threats to those freedoms. And the government created the Office of War Information, which created propaganda. All right, propaganda did all kinds of things. It tried to encourage people to support the war effort, whether recruiting posters or people trying to get people to ration their food or conserve their gasoline. It was a very important aspect of the government efforts of the war. Hollywood jumped right in as well and helped, and they made all these patriotic war movies that have become American classics today. And finally, this does lead to conflict. You had rulings trying to force people to support the American flag, but even the Supreme Court said no, you can't do that because there's religious exemptions and things of that nature. All right, so Japanese Americans were involved, even though they were removed from the West Coast. They were basically removed from their homes, forced to leave their homes by the hundreds of thousands, over 100,000. And they're forced to answer questions about their loyalty to the United States, and they live in these internment camps, basically concentration camps. And even German and Italians didn't face as much discriminations as the Japanese did. Now, the Supreme Court did hear a case against it, but they ruled against the Japanese, saying that they had to go to concentration camps or internment camps, whatever you want to call them. All right, so the war also expands roles for the federal government. You have the Office of Price Administration that placed limits on the prices business could charge, which makes things cheaper and people buy more and makes things more available for the war as well. Also, War Production Board mandated what certain companies would build and produce. All right, so that changes. Also, government spending skyrockets. It's really what pulls us out of the Great Depression. Finally, income tax rates increase as well, which pours money into government coffers. So it drastically changes American society. We'll see you next time.